My name is Tony Atkins from Atlassian, working in the Amsterdam office. The reason I'm here to talk to you is because I have a fair amount of experience with Service Desk. I run the support site that we use to provide help to our customers, including many of you. And I've been waiting for something like JIRA Service Desk to help make our lives and the lives of customers running service desks using JIRA easier. So I have a little bit of content to show you, and we have plenty of time for questions. We don't just put listening in things like this for fun or to market to you. It's actually especially important to hear from you when a product is very young, very new. A lot of you have already shared a few candid thoughts, but part of what I'm here to do is to get your feedback. So we'll have plenty of time for questions. I'll also be here for the networking. Please don't hesitate to ask me anything. We have Service Desk here as well if you want to answer quick questions, do demos. With that, I'll go through briefly what little I have to tell you about Service Desk and hopefully pique your interest. So before we get started, how many of you are using JIRA? Okay, right, I'm in the right room. Has anyone tried using Service Desk? It's good. If the whole room had tried using Service Desk, maybe there isn't such a need for me to come and talk. So that's good. And is anyone using JIRA, just plain JIRA, to provide service to their customers? Right, good. Well, I hope I'll have something to share with each of you. What happened when we went out and asked our customers, the third question, is that we found that 38% of our customers using JIRA use it as a service desk. So this surprised us a bit because JIRA out of the box is designed for development teams. It's designed to manage use cases, breaking down use cases into work packages, executing on those work packages, dividing your work into timelines, but dividing your development work into timelines. So we went out to see, okay, people are using JIRA as a service desk, but what about pure service desk tools? What's out there and what do they do? So what we found in looking at other tools is that they were divided into two camps. On the one end, you have services that have a very simple user experience, very easy to use. On the other end, you have services that give you a lot of control over how your agents can manage their work. And there wasn't a lot in between that gave you both the simple user experience and a powerful agent engine. Which is why, in the middle, we're introducing JIRA Service Desk. So I'm going to take you through a few key highlights. First of all, I'll talk about the intuitive interface, the end user interface. We'll talk about the team queues. And then we'll talk about SLAs and reporting. So to start with, let's go for the intuitive user interface. So I'll tell you a brief story about Ryan, who is an end user within an organization who needs help from the IT team. So he comes with his problem, he puts it in a system, the IT team comes, responds, works on it. It sounds ideal, but there's a problem. Ryan is an end user. Ryan asks for what he needs in the language that normal people use. I need some new software. What his team hears is, oh, that's a procurement request. Why didn't you just say so? There's some translation that needs to take place between the end user language, the everyday language, and the business processes that sit behind fulfilling that request. So with Service Desk, you can take the language that your customers are using and translate it into language that fits your business process. So, for example, this is what your customer would see when they come in to request help. They would choose one of these options, and it's all worded in customer-centric language. It's not an issue type like a procurement request or an upgrade or a fault. It's clearly you need new software, this is a description of what you're going to do. Just a moment. Yeah, there we go. So when they click that, they see a simplified creation form. So you may need 10 or 20 pieces of information for all the range of cases that you deal with, and you have custom fields created for those. But for someone who needs, for example, new software, you may only need 2 pieces of information. And what Service Desk allows you to do is to just ask the customer for the information you need, the absolute minimum information you need, and then to present it to them in the language that makes sense to them. So I'll give you another example of the creation here. So you see, as I type, my keyboard is broken. On the right-hand side, I see suggestions coming from Confluence. So the thing is, your end user, this may be the first time they've ever had to ask for a new keyboard. There was one when they got here. It's always worked. Today it breaks, and this is the first time they have to come ask for something like that. But it's not the first time that your IT team has had to replace a keyboard. They may have done it hundreds or thousands of times, and they know what the processes are. And they've documented those processes. So this integration with Confluence gives you the ability to suggest solutions for your customer before they even create a ticket. They can still create a ticket, but if their issue matches one of these that's suggested, it saves them time. They don't have to wait for an hour or 2 or a day, depending on your service level and your level of business. And it saves you time, because you don't have to deal with the same issue 10 or 100 times. So, just to summarize with the interface, you can put your business process in language that makes sense to your customer. You have a simplified request interface, and you have a self-service knowledge base built on top of Confluence. So let's talk a bit more about what your staff get, what the people helping your customers get. So what you get out of the box are team queues. So JIRA makes it easy to collect information. You can choose to have a whole list of stuff that's owned by a group, but it makes it kind of difficult. It works best, JIRA works best, when you have a single clear assignee who's responsible for that case from beginning to end. And we have tools to help you divide up your work, your development work that is, into clear assignees, such as JIRA Agile. What this gives you is a way to visualize your incoming queue of unassigned tickets all at once, so that your entire team helping the customer has a shared understanding of what they need to work on and when. Ooh, is it blurry?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Just a second. There we go. So, as your customers create new tickets, they don't just come in, first out. The tickets are ordered according to the priorities that you define, and we'll get into that a bit later when we get into SLAs. The point is that your queue is triaged and prioritized in real time without your staff having to do anything. In some organizations, in a team of 4 or 5, you might have one person whose job it is to evaluate every incoming ticket. And if you have that one person spending half of their day or all of their day, then having something like this, which triages and prioritizes your tickets, gives you back time that you could be spending helping your customers. So we'll get into why this issue came in second on the list a bit later. So the thing is, although you get all of this configured out of the box, you don't need to use it the way we've configured it. It's designed for you to take control of and define queues based on the people you have working on them, the character of the issues, such as their priority, the people who are reporting them. In fact, anything that you can describe in JQL, you can use to define a queue. So to summarize, for team queues, you have a shared view for your whole team. It's automatically triaged and prioritized, and it's all backed by JQL. So that's custom team queues. Let's move on to SLAs. So, how many of you have SLAs with your customers? Anyone? Okay, for those of you who don't work with SLAs, an SLA is an agreement you make with your customer around how much time it will take for you to resolve an issue, how soon you will respond, and it helps your customer understand what they can expect from you. It also helps you measure your quality of service, and it's one of the key things that service organizations strive to improve. So this queue that I showed you earlier, these times, are all examples of an SLA. In this case, time to resolution. And I'll get into what those numbers and icons mean. A little closer view. So now we have a very close example. On the left we have a clock, which represents the time remaining to meet the SLA, because SLAs are defined around time. And then on the right we have an indication of the status of the issue. And each of these things, the icon and the color, are meaningful. I'll get into each of them. In this case, the clock means that the issue is in progress. You're still working on it. The clock is still running. You can pause SLAs, and you can define when this happens. You can set rules for stopping the clock when you're waiting for the customer, for example. And then you'll see the issue is not yet been completed. We haven't, for example, resolved the issue, but the clock is paused for now. And the color is also meaningful. An issue that has more than 1 hour remaining is displayed with a white background. It's not yet urgent that we attend to this compared to some other issues. This is not the clearest slide, but when you have less than 1 hour remaining, you get a gray background behind the clock icon to let you know, not critical, but you will need to attend to this within the next hour. When you have less than 30 minutes remaining, it warns you. You still have time to do what you promised your customer you would do when you agreed to the SLA, but the need is now more urgent. And red is reserved for issues where you have already failed to meet the SLA. You're over time with your customer and you want to make it right as soon as you can. And you can see in this case, the number becomes negative. In other words, you've gone beyond the time you had. So this is for an issue that's open. For issues that are resolved, the background changes slightly, but the meaning is still clear. The clock has stopped, but you can see when the clock stopped. And you can also see that SLA was not met in this case. Hopefully more often, you will see cases in which the SLA was met, which is clearly in green, the times are positive, the happy checkbox appears. So all of this appears in the context where your staff are working to provide help for the customer. They see it on the issue creation screen, and you can have as many SLAs as you need. So in this case, very commonly you would have an initial response time, time to first response, and you might have an overall response time, time to resolution. And you may have already met one, as you can see in this example, but you may still need to work to meet another, and you can track these independently. Right, so let's talk a bit more about how these things are defined. So the example we just used, because the issue is a blocker, you can see that we've defined the time to resolution as 2 hours. So for a major issue, a less urgent issue, we might define the time to resolution as within 8 hours. And we're using examples again in JQL because each of these is defined using JQL. So it's not just priority, although many people use that as their primary criterion. You also can look at, For example, who is reporting the issue? You might want to give your boss a lower response time than anyone else. Or to give a more serious example, maybe you have a partner who also provides service and you want to have a shorter SLA so that they have time to follow up with their customer and still meet SLA. So now we're back to I think we're back to it. Now we're back to the queue, which should make a bit more sense now. You've defined your queues in JQL, you've defined your SLAs in JQL, and your issues appear in order according to your SLAs. So just to summarize, there's an SLA engine, which has integrated SLA visibility, and you can configure the way the SLAs work using JQL. So just to move on to reporting. Yep. So Service Desk adds a new level of real-time reporting to help you increase the visibility of the work you do, to understand how you work, and to understand how you can improve your work. So here we see a chart over the course of 30 days, and we see some of the things that we can look at. The number of purchases, tickets by priority, our incoming load, our outgoing load, and we'll drill down a bit more into how you can define these in a bit. But first, just to point out, at each one of these data points, you can see the full details in real time. So when you're defining these, yet again, you use the same language you use to search for issues in JIRA, to define your swim lanes and filters in JIRA Agile. To make a queue, to make an SLA, you use JQL to define what you want to track. And then you have control over how it appears, how it's labeled. It's both simple and powerful. So here's a small testimonial from one of the customers involved in our beta program. I hope to see many more testimonials as people get a chance to use it. The product's been out for a little over a month. But I hope to hear your stories around it as you get a chance to try it out. So just to summarize, you get great reporting out of the box. You create your own reports with JQL. And I missed a point on that last slide because it wasn't obvious. When you install this, it's not just that you're visualizing today's activity and tomorrow's activity as it occurs. You have a retroactive view of your data from the minute you turn on Service Desk. So you define your SLAs today, but you can see how you would have done historically against them, or you can see how your load was historically. You can compare today to the past and see the overall health of your queue. So for example, you can say, we're introducing SLAs in the month. Historically, we would have met these SLAs 40% of the time. Today, we would meet them 80% of the time. We still have work to do, but these are the right SLAs for us to help us mature. It's not such a gap that we would miss it most of the time. It's enough of a gap that we can work to improve and reach that. So that's 4 key points. But on top of all of that, in addition to JIRA Service Desk itself, you get years of JIRA evolution on the back end. So for example, you define the data you want to collect from your customers. You define the data you want your engineers to be able to enter and use. And this is all available from within Service Desk. You define the workflow that you want your engineers to be able to use, one that fits your business process, and that's accessible to you when using a Service Desk project. You still have the same ability to control who receives what kind of contact and when through the notification mechanisms. You also have access to your JIRA user base, obviously. So for example, if you are integrated with LDAP, you have access to that from within Service Desk. If you're using your JIRA instance as your Confluence user base, all of your Confluence users are already in there. You also have fine-grained control over who can do what, just as you would in any JIRA project. And finally, you have access to the Atlassian marketplace, where you can get hundreds of plugins. There's a number, but it doesn't come up yet. Shake. Yeah. Many plugins from the marketplace to extend the way that JIRA works. And this is part of the point that Service Desk is JIRA Service Desk. Your customers have a new view. Your engineers have some new tools. But at its heart, you have access to everything that JIRA can do. So I'm here with a talk, some URLs. I'll talk to you about the question space, but I wanted to make a key point that we're talking about a very young product, a very young team. They have the most flexibility now to make big changes, and they are definitely listening for your feedback. I know many of you ask very similar questions. I hope I have good answers for most of you. But now is the time to join the discussion here, which we relay back to the development teams, and to participate in discussions around the product on JIRA@Atlassian.com. We're still an open company. We still have these discussions in public, and you are, of course, welcome to join. So on that note, are there questions about Service Desk? Yes?
The first question is, you showed us at the beginning a simplified user interface for creating tickets. What's after the creation? Can the customer look at JIRA and have they a simplified interface?
Yes, absolutely.
Do they look at the old?
Right. So I didn't show it for the sake of time to leave room for questions, but it's the same story. The entire user experience on the customer side is simplified. They only see the fields on the customer view that you have made visible to them when they create a ticket. So they still can see the things that they entered about themselves, but they don't see all of the information that you need on the back end to manage their case. They don't need to know how you label their ticket for accounting purposes or billable hours. They just need to know that you've received the information they've entered. So they see a simpler interface and they see much simpler actions. So some of this magic happens on the back end, but the only thing they can see exactly the status of the issue, but the only thing they can do is comment. And when they comment, it puts the ball back in your report. So the workflow from their point of view is incredibly simple, and the interface is also simple as well.
Okay, but if the users are JIRA users too for other development projects, they can also see the complex interface, or
there is possibility to restrict? Absolutely. It depends on which door they come in through right now, but yes, it is still possible for them to see the full issue. Okay. It's up to you. Some people are not going to want their customers to see the full issue, for example, working with business users. But as you say, if you're working with developers, maybe you do want that. Yes?
Does the customer see all the comments, also internal comments?
Oh, no. You have the same control over comments that you've always had. You can choose which comments are visible to the customer and which comments are not visible to the customer. And invisible comments do not result in notifications to customers. They result in notifications to your engineers, for example. Yes?
Is there the possibility to define the default project role for comments now? Because at present,
I understand. That's a long-standing JIRA feature, and the good news is that if that's addressed on the JIRA side, it would be, of course, available to you in Service Desk. The only thing that's changed for that equation is the customer doesn't really have the ability to limit the visibility of their comments.
Yeah.
They are meant to be responding to you, and you need to know what they're saying.
But the support team has to restrict their visibility.
Absolutely, I understand that.
There's
a long-standing feature request for that. If you grab me afterward,
I know this feature is
good for you. Yeah. So there was a question for over here early on.
Yes. So generally, in our company, we are living the ITIL process, of course, which is captured by Service Desk tools. And of course, you have the application lifecycle management process. From our point of view, a different one. And how do you connect these? So we have development teams, and some of these issues which are raised through the service desk are leading to an issue in the ALM context.
So what's nice is once you get it all behind JIRA, you can decide what to do with it. You can have a project that is for your development process, which has a workflow which is mapped to your process, and you can have a project in which issues are reported. Just as you can with any other JIRA projects, you can move issues between if it makes sense. You can also link issues between if it makes sense. And just as happens in JIRA already, if there's a link that to an issue the customer can't see, they don't have to be aware of it. But you can be aware of the full context. Okay, not only have they reported this, we addressed their concern, we did everything we needed to from a customer service point of view, but here's where the work is being tracked. And maybe you have a hook at the end to say, we were waiting for a bug fix. Now it's time to get in touch with the customer again. You can manage it together by moving the issues. You can link the issues to manage it separately.
Yeah, sometimes you have I don't know, 10 issues from 10 different users which have one root cause, and then they're connected to a problem. And this problem, of course, is that it's a big one which leads to a change which has to be divided in several issues and then to be done within the development team. And of course, the ones who raise these issues want to know what has happened to their changes and how they inform. So it's a very complex thing.
So if you have a complex situation, it may not be able to simplify it for you, but you should at least be able to represent what is happening in your complex situation. For example, the tickets where it's being worked on, the process of rolling it out to production, for example. You can represent that with links, and you can share the information you need to make each change.
Thanks to
No problem. Yes.
As a system administrator, I'm more interested in implementing this. Just to get this right, this is not a JIRA plugin, this is its own GVM.
It is a JIRA plugin.
Is it JIRA plugin?
Yes, it sits on top of JIRA.
Okay.
And it's basically works like any other plugin. Anyway, I think that's a good answer to your question. Yes, in the back.
You may have seen it on the plugins page. There have been some ratings, and there was always the same question regarding the user license model.
Yes.
I mean, this is very clear because
I've never heard that before.
Yep.
No, absolutely. To be serious,
Yep.
absolutely. From the first day it was put out, we heard that loud and clear.
Okay.
We hear it at every event where we talk about it.
Yep.
And it's not that we just hear it and then go away and then we can
Yep.
relax. No, we hear it and we're working on it. I don't have anything to share with you yet, but I know that this is a huge issue for us to get right, especially for Service Desk, where you have a team of people who need access to this tool and a much larger group of people who only use the tool once or twice in their career. So we know it's a big concern for Service Desk customers especially, and people are working on it.
because
So, more questions? Or do we have time? Yes.
What's the difference between a queue and a filter? Because it looks quite the same.
Well, they're both based on JQL, right? And in fact, you can refer to a filter from within a queue definition. But a filter would be something if you needed to, for example, do filter subscriptions around it, or tie it into any other part of JIRA, you might choose to use a filter. And you can refer to a filter in the JQL that you define in your queue. But if you define JQL, this priority, that customer type, it isn't available as a filter. It's not quite like the way JIRA Agile works, where the main definition of your board becomes a filter that you can share. It's a little more separate, but you can always use a filter in conjunction with a queue. I could give you a demo during the networking advice. Right. Anything else? Yeah. Oh.
When JIRA is sending out emails, they typically contain a lot of information.
Yes.
Is this also the case for people using Service Desk?
Service Desk gives you the choice of using JIRA's built-in notifications or using a new notification mechanism that is geared towards Service Desk exclusively, which is a much simplified mail interface and also gives you the ability to point them to the link to the service desk instead of the link to JIRA. So, any more questions? Yes.
About the SLAs, you showed us, I think, 3 examples. If it's a blocker, for example, or if it comes from your boss. What happens if you have a blocker from your boss? Which one will win? The lowest number, or?
I believe that the one that is closest to time, that looks the worst for you, that needs the most urgent attention, would win.
Okay.
I think that's the only one that makes sense,
Yep.
right? So I haven't tested it, but I would be stunned if that didn't happen. As I said, during the meeting, run up and we can try it in 5 minutes, but I would say.
Okay.
We have VIP tickets in our organization.
Yeah, and you can define it according to who the person is, who the group, and actually you can define it according to components or anything else that makes sense to you to organize the work. So it really should fit the way you define your SLAs. Anyone else? Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. I will be here for the networking. I'd love to hear more from you. If you want to get a demo, feel free to walk up, and